As the Nazi Party gained support and political influence in Germany, the Western powers became uneasy as a future conflict seemed inevitable. The breaking point was reached in 1939 when the Nazis invaded Poland. Europe became deeply divided and was thrown into World War II. As the conflict continued in Europe, the United States watched on the sidelines and attempted to stay uninvolved until they could no longer remain withdrawn. December 7, 1941. Japan bombs Pearl Harbor and Hawaii, prompting Congress to declare war on Japan and join the Allied forces.
We are now in this war. We're all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history.
After President Franklin D. Roosevelt's call on Americans, both men and women contributed to the effort in different ways. Men headed off to the front lines after joining the military, while women assumed an influential role at home. Many took over jobs in factories and shipyards, building planes, helmets, and bombs, while also taking care of their families. However, as the conflict continued to rise, the U.S. military faced challenges with supplying enough men on the front lines, as well as filling other responsibilities. The shortage of male pilots led to 1,000 women taking to the skies, becoming the first female pilots to fly American military aircrafts, recognized as Women Airforce Service Pilots, otherwise known as WASP. WASP transformed the responsibilities of women in the military as well as their rights in the workforce following the end of the war. This program allowed women to hold roles and responsibilities typically dominated by men in the military and also paved the way for the involvement of women in the American workforce. The members of WASP proved the capabilities of women and ultimately changed a woman's role in society forever. The Women's Auxiliary Faring Squadron, WAFS, was created in September 1942 after Nancy Harkness Love received approval to create a program allowing women to serve as auxiliary pilots. Love recruited 25 women pilots whose initial responsibility was to ferry light aircrafts from factories, but eventually delivered fighters and bombers. However, due to strict requirements and specific qualifications, only 40 women ever wore the uniform. Jacqueline Cochran, an accomplished pilot, established the Women's Flying Training Detachment, WFTD, in November 1942. Although WFTD had lower training standards, pilots were still required to have 200 hours of flight time in addition to a commercial license. The members of WFTD ferried, tested, and delivered planes, as well as performed check flights, towed targets for gunnery practice, and instructed new male pilot cadets. Due to the similarity in advocacy of Cochran, WAFS and WFTD eventually merged on August 5, 1943, creating the Women Airforce Service Pilots. Cochran served as the director of WASP, and Love was the director of the Ferrying Division. WASP gained the attention of women across the country, economic classes, and cultures. During the short 16 months of existence, more than 25,000 women applied for training. However, 1,879 of the candidates were accepted, with a final 1,074 graduates. WASP had a diverse group of pilots, including Hazel Ying Lee and Maggie Gee, who were of Chinese descent, Vernetta Rodriguez and Frances Diaz, who were Latina, and Ola Mildred Rexroth, who was Oglala Sioux. Their ground training consisted of college-level courses on topics like math, physics, navigation, and maintenance. After these classes were completed, the candidates entered flight training, which involved many basic techniques like takeoffs, landings, night flying, parachute bailouts, and cross-country flying. These women were held at very high standards and faced dismissal from the program if they were not performing as desired. Once their training was completed, the pilots reported to one of the 125 Army air bases across the United States. Their missions varied depending on each base's necessity, but included activities like towing targets for gunnery practice, ferrying planes, tracking radar, testing engineering repairs, and providing training to cadets. While most of the women started with flying small, light planes, eventually they flew nearly every type of plane the Air Force had, including fighter jets and heavy bombers. Collectively, the members of WASP flew more than 60 million miles in total while serving their country. Their dedication was undeniable, and unfortunately, 38 WASP died during their mission or in their training. On both missions and military bases, WASP members experienced sexism, discrimination, and hostility from their male peers, as many felt this coveted position of military pilot should be reserved for men only. In addition, WASP were paid considerably less than their male counterparts for the same work. The conflict eventually led to instances of sabotage against the women. Cochrane and Love, as well as General Arnold, hoped the WASP program would be militarized and join the Army Air Forces. In order to achieve these plans, a bill was introduced to the U.S. Congress in 1944, which would authorize women serving as officers and allow WASP to become a part of the Army Air Forces. However, returning male pilots as well as the press, who mass-produced false narratives related to the program, caused much opposition. On June 21, 1944, Congress rejected the bill for WASP militarization, as they believed the demand for women pilots was no longer evident. General Arnold later announced the last trainee class in August and eventually deactivated the program on December 20, 1944. After the disbandment of the program, these women returned to their casual life before the war. Some women decided to remain in the aviation field through working as stewardesses, for commercial airlines refused to hire them as pilots. Since WASP was not a military program, these women were considered civilians and had difficulty receiving the military benefits and recognition they deserved. The women of WASP remained in the background for many years until the 1970s, when the U.S. Air Force announced they would begin to accept women for pilot training. The media then reported the story as the first time women could fly for the U.S. military. Hearing this, the WASP rose up for their long overdue recognition. The impact of WASP is not simply reserved to the rights and responsibilities of women, but can also be attributed to a change in the responsibilities of the government. Government leaders during the war failed to accept their duty to recognize those who served the country in different ways. However, WASP's fight for recognition brought to the attention of the government that it is their responsibility to acknowledge those who serve our country in non-traditional ways, leading to the deserved recognition of future heroes. Even though opposed by a few veterans groups, on November 23, 1977, President Carter signed a bill which granted veteran status to former WASPs. In addition, official discharge certificates were given to the first WASPs, and they eventually received their long overdue World War II victory medals. The WASP were also awarded the Congressional Gold Medal by President Obama in 2009. Although it took a few decades, these women were finally awarded the recognition they deserved for their service and impact. Despite the fact that the WASP weren't immediately recognized, their impact on the rights of women in the American workforce is undeniable. Their success within the program both contributed to the war effort as well as American society in an impactful way. These missions proved to many that women were capable of anything men were, and ultimately provided contradicting evidence of the gender inequality, a characteristic of the 1940s. Women's responsibilities changed after the war as many began pursuing careers while still caring for their families. This increase in responsibilities revealed that women deserved the right to more opportunities and freedoms regarding their career. This change in women's rights and responsibilities within society is in part to the impactful accomplishments and legacy of WASP.